Perfect. So this is our Q1 meeting, today, February 23rd. So to get started, welcome. Thank you all for coming out here. This meeting is being recorded, so it'll be available after if you have to sneak out or anything like that. But we'll definitely appreciate you guys joining us live. We're going to start off with a panel about how to break into BI, how to get either your first job in the area, maybe a promotion, maybe you have a job somewhere else and you're hoping to get into this space. So Tom was going to host, but he has some power outages, so you can call me Tom for the day. And then we have our panelists, Jason, Jerica, Josh, and Supriya, who are going to walk us through their advice and experience kind of working in this area. And then Kevin is going to talk about the DuBois challenge. So every year in February for Black History Month, there's the DuBois challenge. So we'll highlight some different designs from that, as well as kind of talk to the story about W.E.B. Du Bois. And then, as always, we'll stick around for virtual networking at the end. So great time to just, geek out, talk about things, and stay in touch. So with that being said, I will stop sharing and we'll actually jump right into our panel. So to kind of get started, I think Supriya might not be on yet. She is feeling a little under the weather. So to get started, Jerica, Jason, and Josh, the three J's, look at that. Do you guys want to start by kind of, introducing yourself, where you work, and what kind of stuff you do on a day-to-day basis?
Who wants to go first?
Yeah.
I'll go first. I'm Jason Dingee. I work at Talent Cookbook. It's inspired by the engineering technical cookbooks. So it's me and one of my best friends. We started the consultancy back in 2008 or 2018, sorry. And we work with engineering improved startups throughout Chicago mostly, but with COVID, we're 100% remote now. And super excited to be on this panel. I actually helped Tom get the job, his current job at CCC a couple of years ago. So I'm very appreciative of, this opportunity. And yeah, that's me.
It's awesome.
I'll go next. Hi, everyone. Jerica Delphia. I work at Discover Card with Ashley and Kevin. I mainly focus on post-charge-off collections, which is really fun. I manage a group of about 9 people, all very talented BI developers. The skills range from in Tableau 24 hours a day to not opening Tableau, and I'd love to chat more about that with you guys. And I've been with Discover about 10 years, almost 11 years, I think, 10.5 years we'll call it. And that's about it. Happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Josh Wilson. I'm an independent contractor / freelancer. Do a lot with market research data, survey data in Tableau. I started doing this about 3 years ago as far as being out on my own. Actually, I worked for Deloitte Consulting for 12 years prior to that. And then through combination of a few events, I was moving back from Germany to the US and decided I didn't want to be in the type of role with Deloitte that I was. I didn't want to travel anymore, and always knew that I liked Tableau. I first started using Tableau in 2013. It wasn't like a main part of my job. So I probably learned more in the past 3 years than I did the first, 7 or however many. But I was always kind of drawn to it and decided to start freelancing. And so I've been doing that for the past 3 years. I'm also the lead of the market research Tableau user group, so which is a virtual user group. So we actually have an event. It'll be in 2 weeks. It should be announced shortly, but it'll be on March 7th. So if you're looking for user group events to attend, be on the lookout for that. And happy to be here.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you guys kind of, started to touch on it, but I do want to give you, the opportunity to elaborate, and maybe we'll go in the same order. Jason, Jerica, Josh. It's like a tongue twister almost.
It's also alphabetical, nicely done.
Yeah, thank you. I'm always thinking. So kind of give you guys the opportunity, how did you get to the role you are today? So maybe previous roles that you had, what you learned about likes, dislikes, all of that stuff, just kind of to highlight the journey of, you typically don't land, at one job and stick with it forever. So kind of just a story of jumping around and learning about what you like and what you're good at.
Yeah, so I started in software sales back in 2013, realized I enjoyed talking to the technical people more than I enjoyed actually selling a product. And so that was kind of the gateway into moving into technical recruiting. I've been a recruiter at one of the largest search firms in the US, to an internal recruiter, to fast growing startups, to now kind of owning and operating my own boutique firm. So it's definitely all over the place, but it's really exciting to be able to chat with people from all different backgrounds.
All right, so yeah, my background, we go back to September of 2012. I just moved to Ohio and I just graduated college with a degree in multimedia and 3D animation design. So I just need money. I see that Discover is hiring for an administrative assistant position. And I go, I think I can do that. I call in, I talk to the recruiter, don't have any of the things they're looking for. And she asks me, do you know how to do this? And I say, no, but I can Google it. And she goes, oh, well, I think I have a job for you then. And they get me in a position where I'm on the phone as an agent in the bankruptcy department. And from there, I'm just seeing opportunities where we could just be doing things better. I see them using paper and I'm like, we have computers. Let's do our work in the computer instead of on paper. I am responsible for some of the Access databases we have, which it's kind of irritating to some people, but you work with what you have. And it just kind of escalated from there. It was Excel, Access. I got really heavy into SQL, found Tableau, and I'm like, wow, this solves so many problems. And then kind of got scouted from headquarters because of the work I was doing in Tableau. And the rest is kind of history. I just kind of fell in love with business intelligence. I really like data. I really like visualizing data. I didn't think the multimedia degree would do anything for me, but it turns out that, there is quite a lot of design philosophy that goes into building dashboards. And then through working at Discover, I was able to, through their tuition reimbursement program, get my bachelor's in computer science, and then ultimately get my master's degree in data science. So I really think about it like I grew up at Discover. I've been here for 10 years. They've treated me really well, and I've been able to grow my skills. And now I'm at the level I am as a senior manager, managing 9 people. Really couldn't be happier. And I think that's it. I think that's about it. I'm happy to take any questions though at the end here, if anyone has any questions for me.
And then Josh?
Yeah. Yeah, it's been quite a journey for me. So my degree is in electrical engineering, and I decided to get that degree because I loved math. And I also, so like my second choice was journalism, which is you probably wouldn't expect. But it's kind of like this left brain, right brain sort of theme that I have. Math and being like very analytical is always how I'm most defined, but I sort of have these like creative interests, which I think also has drawn me to data visualization. So I got my degree in electrical engineering, didn't want to be an engineer. Then I got my master's in engineering and management. I thought, well, then let me get some of the business side, see what happens there. Then got hired by Deloitte, and ended up in their SAP practice. But that didn't really matter. Like the projects that I was on were actually data related, and I learned some skills like Excel and VBA and databases and SQL. And my first project was a data warehousing project, and I actually built a tool on that project that was looking at like different demographics of people who are buying products, and we visualized some of that in Cognos, I think it was at the time. So this was quite a while ago. And I enjoyed that. And it was kind of a theme like throughout my career at Deloitte was I was attracted to like analyzing and visualizing data, even though it wasn't always like the primary thing that I was doing. I was along the lines, I got into like project management coaching. So I was just coaching projects on project management and estimation, and got into agile, which was really which I really enjoyed, and then into design thinking as well. And then when I ended up leaving Deloitte and I was moving back to the US, I didn't know what I was like. I didn't just start freelancing right away. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and so it was kind of this crisis in my career. And I took a bunch of trainings. Like I was really interested in design thinking, and so I took these trainings on like it was like UX research and UX psychology, and like trying to. I was interested in people and how people think and how they use products and how they what motivates them. And so I was kind of going in these different directions, and then I sort of got to a point where I was like, well, I need to like start making money basically. And so that's when I started freelancing with Tableau. I was like, well, I always loved Tableau. I can do this for a while I'm kind of figuring it out. And then I got some projects that were with survey data, and that's where when I found market research, I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. What can I do with this? And I stumbled onto market research and realized that it tied in all of these things that I've always been interested in, like back when I like thought about going into journalism, just like telling stories about people, and that can be a part of Tableau's data storytelling. And so there's all these things that kind of coalesced around this sort of new career path for me. And I ended up just I got more and more clients, and things kind of built up, and I'm at the point now where I have no plans of going back to a real job, and I really glad of where I'm at. I think we'll probably get into more of this of like pros and cons of being like an employee versus just being like a freelancer. I can talk more about that, but yeah, like where I'm at now.
That's awesome. Thank you all for kind of like sharing your journey. I feel like that's one thing I love. The more and more people I meet kind of in like the BI community through like Tableau conference or user groups and stuff like that, everyone has like such different stories, kind of like where they started, even like going back to your major, like Kevin was a chemistry major and look at him now. So it's just like funny. Everyone kind of like has different paths, and then really, just kind of by taking different opportunities, you learn what you like, you learn what you don't, and then eventually you get closer and closer to that dream job. So that's awesome. So I kind of have a specific question for all of you. So I'll kind of go down the line, and then we'll actually open it up to Q&A from everyone on the phone. So, be thinking of questions. It's almost everyone else's turn, but, I am going to hog the mic for a few more minutes. So, Jerica, like you said, you lead a team of 9. What are kind of like green flags you look for when hiring onto your team, and then red flags that you avoid?
Sure. Yeah. So biggest thing for me is when I'm interviewing, I want to hear that you've had challenges. I don't want to hear that you've never faced a challenge, everything's very easy for you, because I know that's not the truth. So I just want to hear someone talk about, here's a problem I faced and here's how I solved it, or here's how I wasn't able to solve it, and here's how I talked through that with my manager when we came up with a different, solution that wasn't what we originally thought. So saying things like, I didn't know, but I figured it out, or I didn't have an immediate answer, so I took it away and worked on it, or I taught myself the skill I needed to accomplish the task. That's the kind of thing I really look for, because in what we do, technology is constantly changing. Who knows what technology we're going to be using in the future? So I always look for someone who has shown the ability to teach themselves. I need to know that they have an interest in doing that and that they enjoy doing that. I like working with people who like doing the work we're doing. That always makes it easier. So another thing I look for is hearing passion in their voice when we're talking about these things. So hearing them talk about, I'm subscribed to, this user group, I go to the Chicago Tugs, or I check Visit the Day every day, things like that, that just tell me they're truly interested in it. It's not just in your day job. And then some red flags, I would say, like I said, not talking about challenges or failures. I think it's just doing them a disservice. It's expected. Let's just talk about it. That's what the job is working through challenges and failures. And that's how we learn. Another red flag is not having a Tableau public account. I feel like if we're talking about Tableau and you're telling me you're proficient in it, I expect some kind of proof of that. I can ask interview questions and have them, what's a dimension versus a measure, and I can tell if they have the basic knowledge. But depending on the role I'm looking for, I would like a portfolio, and that can be on Tableau Public, and it can be really bad. That's okay, but at least it shows me that you're trying, you're out there building something, and I can always help them with the visualization part. And then the last one is just not taking risks, so I want to hear about where they maybe stepped out of their comfort zone and learned something new, or went away with a project that they weren't sure was going to work, and maybe it didn't work. But I just like hearing about, I think that tells me they're innovative, and that that I'm able to kind of trust them to not just do the job, but try to escalate the work that we're doing. And yeah, I think that's about it. The high level, I'd say green flags, red flags.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like my favorite thing that you said was talking about having a portfolio out there, even if it's not perfect, just having the courage to post it out there and taking the time to actually play with the data and do stuff kind of on your own. We have Elisa Davis, who works at Discover with us, and she's a Tableau ambassador. She has a great presentation on her Tableau public journey. And one thing that stuck out for me that kind of reminded me of what you were saying, Jerica, is that she was saying at the beginning, she was scared to post things because they weren't perfect. And I mean, you'll never post a dashboard and then never touch it again. There's going to be something that happens, an improvement that comes along. So really, like you said, just getting something out there, something that you can point people to is huge.
Yeah, and I mean, the big thing is don't be afraid to be seen trying. It's okay. That's really what we're looking for, someone who's trying, so exactly what you said, Ashley.
Perfect. Yeah. And then Jason, I have a question for you, kind of about how to make a good impression or first impression to someone who's working at a company or hoping to get a job for, just kind of how to have a memorable experience with them.
Sure. Yeah. So this goes off exactly what Jerica was talking about, and that's building your brand. So you definitely need to create a professional digital footprint, and that is, a Tableau account, but maybe it's a Dev.to account, maybe it's a Twitter account, Stack Overflow, GitHub. And if you're full-fledged into job seeking, I suggest you have 4 sites going at one time. And you want to make sure that your profile picture and bio is consistent across all platforms. And I've even seen some people use a Notion as their career website, as a single repository of hey, when you're reaching out to a recruiter or hiring manager, you send that Notion website, which is free, and it has all of those links to their social accounts, resume details like that. So that's step one is do you have a good brand out there, and is there enough information for me to make a reasonable judgment, right? That's number one. Number two is not to have too much information on your resume, and I know that's kind of counterproductive to what I just said, but I'll see people recent grads with 30 technologies on their resume, and I'm thinking there's no way that you're good at all 30 of those. So I would just focus on the top 5 that you feel are your best strengths. And when you reach out to hiring managers and recruiters, if you are a recent grad or an associate, and I call an associate 0 to 3 years of experience, your best bet is to reach out to internal recruiters and decision makers directly. Third-party recruiters are going to be helping more mid to senior career individuals. So, don't feel discouraged if you're like, wow, I'm reaching out to a lot of recruiters, but they're not helping me. Really, if you're kind of entry level, focus on the internal kind of messaging, and then keep it short and sweet when you're reaching out to them. Like I said, if you've created that digital profile, if you've created that website where you have everything on there, you don't have to send a really long diatribe to the hiring manager or recruiter. Something really short and sweet, maybe that you saw a job posting at the company, maybe describing like, hey, this is what I'm really good at within Tableau, sending it off and kind of going from there.
Awesome. Thank you. And Supriya, I see that you jumped on. Thank you for joining us. I know that you're a little under the weather, so we definitely appreciate you taking the time to still get on the call. We kind of did some intros at the beginning. So if you're ready, you can do an intro now, and then we can, throw you right into the line of questioning if you're up for it.
Sure, yeah. Sorry for not the best day I'm having.
Oh, no.
Hey everyone, this is Supriya, and I work as a manager for data analytics in CCC. And my expertise is into, I would say, data domain. I have been in this industry for more than 15 years. And I worked as a data architect for a long time, and then data-driven decisions and analytics always, that's my best interest. So I moved on to the same career path on the big data platform. And today I manage data engineers whose expertise is building data pipelines on big data platform. And we use Tableau heavily in CCC as our BI platform for building on.
The audio is cutting out.
Oh yeah, we might have lost your audio. Supriya, can you still hear us? Can you hear us, Supriya? Oh, looks like she went on mute. Maybe we'll jump back to Josh and then check back in and.
Sorry.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, you're good.
Did I lose you guys? Okay.
Yeah.
Where did I exactly stop?
You said that you guys use some Tableau, but I think you're about to elaborate on other technologies you also
Right. So we use heavily Tableau today to build our internal and external dashboards. So some of these new products, when we build it embeds the decision making of how we are doing overall with the adoption and all that, versus some of our established products our customers use to see the gaps in data, how their users are performing and all that. So it's really, and sometimes it helps us to take business decisions, so that's our strength. And I can touch base if any specific questions comes my way. That's like my 2-minute, I would say, brief high-level intro.
Awesome. And I do have one question for you. So kind of talking about different technologies, like you said, you guys have Tableau, you use Tableau. A lot of times you'll use other technologies around it. What are some important skills do you think it is to have to work in BI? And how do you stay up to date on changing technologies?
Right. So you are right there, right? Every single day there is something new in the market and we are continuously evolving, learning out of that. The most important thing is curiosity about things, right? Like why this is happening, what will happen if this doesn't happen, to always curious to learn and I would say ask more questions, right? To understand what's going on and then how things can be done differently. Today it could be Tableau, tomorrow Power BI, Click. There are so many products in the market, but behind all of these, the fundamentals are same, right? Fundamentals are, you are going to build some, I would say, what your customer needs. If nobody is asking, so first thing is, what is the gap to understand what are we trying to solve the problem? And another thing that is important, and I tell my folks is, doesn't matter how cool dashboards we build, it has to be like the data or the story we are trying to tell also should make sense, right? So that's also important to understand that, okay, whatever we are trying to represent behind, like, behind the scenes, all these make sense. Who is looking at it? Does it make sense? Are we trying to solve their problems day in, day out? So to coming back, doesn't matter what technology we use, important is the fundamentals of what are we trying to solve.
Yes, that's awesome. Thank you. And then I have a question for Josh, and then we'll open it up, to questions from the whole audience. And you guys heard Supriya say it, questions are important. So be thinking, it's almost your turn. So Josh, I wanted to go back to you, and you kind of ended your career journey by saying that, you don't think you'll leave the freelance space. So kind of what are some of the things that you've fallen in love with for freelance, and kind of like why you think that this is a good role for you?
Yeah. For me, it's the ability to control my time and do, on a daily basis, I can kind of, wake up and, of course I have deliverables and things that I have to get done, but, there's, just a layer of flexibility in there that, I could take the afternoon off and, go do something kind of spur of the moment sort of thing. If I'm like, oh, well, actually, I don't have anything else, I need to do today, I can, it's just that sort of level of control and freedom, and not having, somebody else kind of tell me what to do. There's certainly, I don't regret, having worked, like for an employer. I got tons of great skills, worked with amazing people, and that's actually probably what I miss the most is I'm kind of out here on my own. I mean, obviously I work with people and I team with other freelancers or small independent firms to work on projects, and that's cool. But I do miss kind of having like a broader sort of team and making those connections and working on something over a longer period of time than just sort of like project to project. I definitely miss that. Not enough, to make me want to go back. Just because, I'm also sort of like in a different point in my life. I have a 4-year-old daughter, and it's really nice to be able to just like take her to school take her to daycare every day, or pick her up, or so that's a big part of it, I think. If I were like starting out my career again, I probably want to take a similar path that I did, maybe knowing what I know now, that I would end like market research, and that Tableau is where I really want to be, and maybe that would give me a little bit more direction starting out. But I think for me at least, it was important to kind of start out in like a large organization to be able to learn and make more connections. But yeah, those are kind of some of the trade-offs, and it's different stresses. So when if you're in an organization, I mean, for me, it was I was traveling, I was in consulting, and so it was like, I knew a lot of Mondays, I was going to be flying somewhere and probably like getting up early, and so Sunday it's like, I'd already kind of start to stress out about it, and kind of affected me that sort of way, and so I don't have that stress now, but now the other stress is like it's more like the uncertainty. I don't have a steady paycheck. It's like a kind of like I have to make sure I have enough work coming in, and then there's this whole other part of I'm managing my own business, and so I've got to I'm the admin. I'm the I got to go out and sell projects and sell myself, and to continually bring work in as I'm also delivering the work. So but that's something that interests me and that I enjoy, and So it's just different types of stress and different things to take into consideration.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. And you do have like a really cool perspective kind of being in both roles, like, you know, being a consultant for a large company and then going off on your own doing freelance work. So it's kind of nice, you know, what are the pros and cons between the two? And like you said, definitely valuable experience to have them both. You can draw from learning experiences on both sides.
Yeah, and you made a comment earlier of like, you know, don't have a real job. I actually think you have the real job. And sometimes I wonder what I actually like, you know, contribute to society in a given day at work. So just want to put in that plug. I do think consulting is a considerably more honorable way of living and making money.
Yeah, it's awesome. So we'll open it up for questions from everyone on the call. So I don't know if we have any in the chat, or you can jump off mute and feel free to ask away.
I guess I'll get us cooking. Jason, I was going to ask, like, you know, for, you know, what you probably could imagine as like a bit of the profile of, you know, folks coming to the TUG. Right. Tom actually sent me a text, like, see what schools folks are from. So it's kind of cool to see. And we got some Arizona states, Illinois State. So maybe there's a Ashley alumni connection cooking there. University of Cincinnati. So there's obviously a Tom connection there too. But can you tell us a little bit about like the most recent person that you've helped that's akin to sort of like our skill sets and akin to the type of job we'd be looking for? Totally understand, you said, right, you might not be working with someone in their first 3 years of career, which obviously like maybe just getting out of college is like that, but you know, you're probably working with someone middle management, right? Right, managing like a group of analysts like us. Can you tell us a little bit about that story? Right? What was that journey? How did you work with them? What were they like?
Sure, yeah. So actually one of my top client the last 3 years, healthcare company, health tech company in Chicago. They're one of the outliers where they actually they don't have an internal recruiting team at all. Like they don't want any internal recruiters, which I find
Oh wow, okay.
And so and they have a very, very like low key profile online because they have this theory that they don't want their people to be poached or whatever. Anyways, that's another question, but yeah, so they were like, hey, we're looking for business analysts, and I was like, oh, okay, like, yeah, we can look at business analysts, but really what it was like a data analyst that was doing like data visualization. And so I was like, okay, that's interesting. Like that's also another tip is like the job that you're looking for might not be called a business intelligence engineer, right? It could be a data analyst, it could be a data engineer, it could be even a software engineer, right? So or a business analyst. So I'd say one, keep your eye out open for the different jobs. But yeah, it was a candidate that was actually from Northwestern. He completed the Northwestern Data Analytics Boot Camp in 2022, mid to late 2022. And yeah, like his background was not in tech, but just like everyone else on the panel, they were doing bits and pieces of the job. Right. So they were doing a lot of Excel work. They were starting to get into some like SQL querying within that. Then their database started to get larger. Then they started kind of learning Tableau. And then that was their kind of journey to the data analytics bootcamp. So yeah, we ended up placing 2 people on the team over there. And yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
And actually one thing, so Tom also, obviously I had mentioned, I helped Tom get his job at CCC. You know, we kind of became friends through it all, but how I actually found him is I found him on Twitter. And so going back to my suggestion around like making sure that you have 4 social media sites that are actively moving, it's kind of pointless to create a Twitter account and to not actively use it to try to get hired, right? It's, you know, push content in it's not like a Gary V thing, like, oh, you got to publish 10 pieces of content a week or anything like that. It's not that hard, right? People want to help you get a job, and so that's already compelling as it is. But I found Tom, I was going through I think it was the Daily Viz hashtags, and he was super active on that. And he was not even in tech. He was doing a lot of Tableau, data visualization, but he was in urban planning. And I was able to find him because of his Tableau portfolio, because of what he was doing on Twitter, because I wasn't quite finding the candidates that I was looking for on LinkedIn and other sources. And so that's another thing to keep in mind is, you know, that one post about, hey, this is a dashboard I made my senior year in college, or maybe this is what I did my internship, that might very well get you noticed, especially in the entry-level position.
You know, I want to add what Jason said, like how some of the job profiles, it doesn't say your exact role and how these are a little bit convoluted. So in CCC, we have a lot of POs and they are so good at Tableau, right? Like we expect them to be as good as, because they are the people who are talking to customers, showing them this visualization, making changes and all that. So a lot of the times they are pretty hands-on, as good as any BI developer too. So some of these roles, like, you know, it's talking to customers, like along with your knowledge on, you know, any BI tool, if that is something that interests you, like, you know, talking to customer, being the face of it and trying to understand the requirements and all that. A lot of companies, they have a blend of, like, you know, these kind of skill sets. So you can be in the lookout for that too.
Yeah.
They answered it in chat, but I don't know if you want to bring it back up because it's not a bad one.
Yeah, there was a question, let me find
Mine.
exactly. Yeah, we
Answer
have
these
like
questions.
dual monitors with different
Be on
laptops.
the same screen.
Anthony asked a question. There were some answers in the chat, but you know, if people aren't following along in the chat, maybe just kind of having the discussion out here. Also, do you have any thoughts on showing a portfolio while working under an NDA?
We figure we throw that back to Josh and Jerica, right? So you already answered it in the chat, but like quick highlight of like what you said in the chat, but like see where it goes. I thought of re-asking it just because Jason just said, I found Tom, who wasn't even in the industry where I placed Tom, because Tom was basically making a portfolio outside of work.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so what were some of your comments about that, you know, that NDA and all my portfolios inside a company?
Yeah, so I said, you know, you've got to do the work. You've got to go find public data, even find someone who built a dashboard that you think could be improved and rebuild it if their data is accessible. The other thing is, I mentioned earlier that some people on my team don't even use Tableau. So if I can see that you're able to solve a problem efficiently, that could pique my interest on its own. One other question down is like, what are we interested in today? And it's what I'm interested in is really people who can, like I said earlier, just kind of go above and beyond and solve the problem. So one problem that we have is different data. I've got two different systems, don't have the same data. Sometimes we've got so many systems at Discover, and sometimes the systems don't match, and sometimes the system might have a problem. And so I need someone who can pour through the data and know when it's a coding problem, if they've written something incorrectly, or that it's actually a system problem. So that is something you kind of have to learn. You've got to do more of it. So same thing, this is just a good exercise to get more practice. I heard something someplace that like the best potters, like people who make pots in the world, are ones who make a lot. They just make them and make them and make them. And then they make better pots than someone who spends 4 hours making one pot, just because they've got the mechanics down. It's the same thing with this type of stuff. You just got to do it and do it, and get it out in the world, essentially. And maybe the sheer volume of what you've done is enough to kind of impress someone. And then I kind of threw in Josh because it sounded like he has access or has some ideas about public marketing data or survey data. So I kind of threw his name out there that he might know of some good places to get public data.
Yeah, I mean, so I have a dashboard on Tableau Public that was survey data. It was actually from another Tableau user group. They had a contest that were basically they surveyed the the people in their group who were attendees to ask about what they were interested in, and then had a contest to analyze that survey. But there's also Kaggle, which has a lot of data sets out there. They're not always like the best, but it's just like data that you can work with and you can make something out of. Certainly you can kind of search on there and find lots and lots of different types of data if you're looking. I would also say on this whole, like the kind of bridging the concepts of and the question about the NDA, but then having a presence and a portfolio. If you're the stuff that you work on, you might just think, oh, I'm just doing this for a portfolio, but it could also be like opportunity for passion projects and just things that you're really interested in, which you might not think will go anywhere other than just to sort of demonstrate your skills, but it could end up that thing that is your passion project, somebody sees that and they want you to keep doing that exact thing, and I think that's important. It's important, and it's a lot of times it's hard, because it almost feels like I got to do this extra work. Then I've been working all day to do my day job or whatever, and now I have to do this other thing. But you could find out that this other thing actually gives you more energy and more excitement because it's something that you're really interested in. And then when you go into an interview or for another job, then you can really talk passionately about that, which is something that came up and Jerica was mentioning before, is you want to see people who are really interested in something. So if you're ever in a situation where you're kind of like, and this can apply more broadly, where you're thinking about like, oh, I should know these skills, or I should do this, or should be like that. That's gonna come across, and people pick up on that you're not really, you're just doing it because you think you should, and you're not necessarily passionate about it. And there might be something that you're really passionate about that you're thinking, oh, I shouldn't be like passionate about it, I shouldn't talk about that. But I think it's more important to just be real and be who you are, because people hire people, they don't hire resumes or skills, right? And so I think that it's important to kind of make that sort of human connection, and because people are going to hire people that they want to work with, right? It's not just because you can do these three things on a list.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love what you said about like making it like a passion project. Like if you're creating an online portfolio, no one is like, you have to look at this like data set that you may not have like much interest in. Like this is just a time to like dive into things that you actually care about, especially if you're doing it in your free time. Like you want to make it fun. So being able to show your personality and the work that you've done in a portfolio is going to put you miles ahead of other people who are also trying to break into this space, and they don't have anything published out there. They're not like trying to get in touch with like the Twitter community and stuff like that. So that's awesome. And then we have a few more questions in the chat. So one is, what is something you find challenging on your day-to-day work? And is there anything that you're curious or worried about in the coming years in terms of like technology and stuff like that?
Anybody want to touch that one?
I can kind of speak to challenges, and it's not so much like in the coming years. It's just a problem I think you have in the BI space, is that people just do things differently, and to have a good user experience, you need consistency. You need people to know like, oh, the home button's going to be in the top left, or my filters are going to be here, and this is what my filters are going to look like, and I'll have an apply button and things like that. So it's always a learning curve hiring someone new who's been doing something a certain way. And it's always a balance between, we want a consistent user experience, but we also don't want to stifle creativity and innovation. So it's kind of like walking that tightrope where my direction to the team is like, hey, this is what we do generally, but if you've got a better idea, let me know. Because the whole point of what we're doing is to make a good product, and we want it to be helpful. And we want it to make it as easy to understand as possible, as easy to understand as quickly as possible. So that's something I face a lot of times in my area. It's just getting that right balance of creativity and consistency.
I can add something to that. So I think given the, I would say with the time changing when we have so many competitions in the market and to solve the same problem, you have so many options. At times it is challenging to pick the right solution, right? Like there are so many, I would say for the same thing, there will be so many vendors competing and so many different technologies. It's very hard to understand at the very beginning or initial stages of a new product or any new development that really, what are you looking for or what are you trying to solve and what is the best tool to do that? Because some of the times, if you don't go down the right path of getting the understanding of the entire scope of the product and you end up choosing a wrong solution, you end up spending more money and you are not even solving the right problem. And then you are starting from day one. So obviously there is a lot of learning and fast learning there to understand and adapt, but it is really important to know that out of all of these options, what is the right for you? The same solution that applied to something else might not be applicable for your situation. So to get to that point is very important at the beginning is what I feel.
Yes, I definitely agree. So we have two more questions in the chat, and they kind of are similar. So I'm going to do my best to put them into one question. And then if there's more questions, for the panel, I don't know what your guys' availability is. Typically we do, virtual networking after, so maybe we can ask them then, or, you can shoot them to Kevin and I, and we can try to follow up and get you guys answers. So these last two questions are kind of about how to stand out in interviews. So one, how do you highlight the work that you've done in a previous role or maybe through school to best kind of stand out from other potential hires? And what are like the skills that you guys recommend focusing on? There's a lot of buzzwords in technology. There's new languages and tech and coming out every single day. So what do you guys kind of like recommend to specialize in and maybe highlight in an interview? Or if you don't know that skill yet, maybe it's a good thing to get involved in a boot camp or something like that to try to ramp up. I know it's a lot that I just threw at you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I can share that because stuff changes so often, technology changes so often, you just need to focus on the foundations. So like database architecture, that's pretty foundational. A lot of what we're going to be doing is using databases. You need to be able to get data from that database somehow. So I'm not sure who said it, maybe Jason, but I don't care how you do it. It's just that you've shown proficiency that you can do it. And then I can train you on whatever technology we use. But I need to know that you've kind of proven that you understand the methodology. Because like I said earlier, it's always going to change. For us, I mean, we're using Python, we're using Snowflake, we're using Tableau, we're using SQL, but those can change. That's just the flavor of the day. So I'm really just looking for someone with a good foundation and that they're able to teach themselves.
I think from the recruiting side, technology is not created in a vacuum, right? Like companies, when they're trying to hire someone, they post on their job description what they're looking for. So if you're starting to see trends within like, wow, like this, I'm starting to see a lot of companies mention this technology that we didn't learn in school or that's kind of new, then it's worth, kind of checking in on. But I would really just focus on like, instead of focusing on what you don't know, like focus on the top 3 things that you're really good at. And I mean, the foundational experience, I can't echo that enough.
And Jason also put a document in the chat, right? Jason, you want to kind of give like a little highlight of what that is? Folks can grab it.
Yeah, yep. So it was like the past couple of days I was like, all right, I don't even know what I'm going to talk about. There's just like a lot going around in my head. But it's just like a 10 bullet points of like 10 ways to supercharge your job search, right? So I kind of went into the first one around building your brand across social media, along with some posting ideas that some have already been shared, right? Making improvements to existing data that you see, different products. The next one would be like to join and network within curated communities by being in this meetup. That's one of the curated communities, but I'm talking about joining Slack groups, Discord servers, putting your name into layoff lists, right? The best way to find like Slack and Discord communities, I put links in there to kind of scour all of those different communities. What's really important in these communities, and I'm sure people on the panel can back me up, is like these are really good, but like you want to make sure that you don't spam people, right? These are people that really care about what they do, and so it's best to like introduce yourself, participate in the discussion, ask questions, and seek feedback on your resume. I've seen that work really well, particularly in the Chicago Tech Slack. If any of you are familiar there, there's a hiring channel where people will put their resume in and they can get feedback from, their fellow engineer. So that's definitely one way to kind of supercharge it. And then also startups. I know people are like, maybe I don't want to work for a startup for stability reasons. If the last 3 years have shown us anything, kind of there's no job is safe, especially recruiters. But startups provide a really unique opportunity to be a part of a team that's growing something from the foundation. And startups are going to be a bit more flexible as well when it comes to experience. They might not look for someone that has those 10 list of technologies. They might look for someone who just has 1 or 2 items. And I put 6 links to 6 links to job boards for startups. And then one last one that I'll go over is go on Blind and Fishbowl. They're 2 kind of curated, closed off communities, but people are giving out their referral codes to jobs internally, right? So I've in the past, I've seen a couple of people from Discover saying, hey, we're hiring this role. If you're interested, I'd be able to refer you in. That's a great way to get some referrals into a company when you are early, right? If you're an early career or an associate, you might not have that list of previous work to kind of lean on. Yeah, I think that's it. And then the last thing, sorry, one last thing, is from the behavioral side, make sure you use the STAR method, which is situation, task, action, and result. And I put 2 links into like that really goes into detail around like how to answer questions. And yeah, I think that's it. I'll leave that up. If you do have any other questions, feel free to email me, reach out. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
So I think that we're at our time for the panel. Thank you guys so much, for taking the time to speak with us. Very helpful information. I know I learned a lot from listening to you guys. I know I was able to ask a lot of my questions at the beginning, but it was all very informative. So thank you guys for taking the time to do that. So now, Kevin, I can pass it over to you to cover our next topic, which is the Du Bois Challenge.
All right, so let me share my screen. Let's see if I do it properly too. Yeah, and I want to second Ashley. Huge thanks. Like I thought we were like maybe bringing in guests to maybe talk to folks that are in the tug. I was even learning and enjoying in that space, right? And I'm 19 years of Discover, well over 20 years in career, and definitely a lot of like good wisdom and insights. Jason had one about the networks or the Slack channel. I would put in a plug for the Data Visualization Society because it's a little bit tool agnostic, but it is more about like what are you accomplishing with data visualization, and exactly what he was describing as like there's a sub channel for resumes and hiring and like, hey, how can I find a mentor? And I've been in both directions in that situation, looking for someone and was looking for a role. So definitely a good one that's there. To go along with the consistent feedback of it's good to have a portfolio, it's good to get involved in external data, it's good to show items that are of passion. The topic I have to celebrate Black History Month is the Du Bois Challenge, both because right, kind of celebrates a great moment in Black history, which is also a great moment in data viz history, but is one of those like social challenges where you can play with fairly clean data, but you're actually then participating in this conversation that also like really is kind of bringing the data viz moment, the Black history moment together. So brief introduction of myself, which I guess indirectly is also an introduction of Ashley, now that she's joined the team. There's a group here at Discover, the Credit Business Intelligence team. So we make dashboards for the part of the company that's giving out credit to people. So either you're trying to get a loan, we say yes or no. If we say yes, we figure out how much of a loan. Maybe you already have a credit card, you want a little bit more loan, right? We make those decisions as well. And it's a high advanced analytic data science environment, needs lots of data visualization. We meet every morning at 10:30 to look at how did yesterday go, all using Tableau dashboards we've built for partners. You probably don't know all the cryptic words on the side, but it's just sort of like we started off in the new account space. That's all the ACQs, acquisition. We branched out into a lot of dimensions of how we take care of customers. Those are the light blues, right? The portfolio. And recently we got into student loans, which is very dirty data and is driving us crazy. So the story for Du Bois, I get zero credit for the background that I'm going to share. I only get credit for me. I picked 4 showcases to share with everybody. That's the only thing that actually is of me contributing value. So these are really the folks who deserve the credit. So Anthony Starks pretty much is the originator of the Du Bois Challenge. He even has his own custom coding data visualization language that he does his visual in that. So he's also a freelancer, right? Kind of like a custom data designer. And so when he learned of what I'll walk you through, it was his passion project. Right? It was his passion project to really immerse himself in the data, recreate the dashboards. He sells posters of his like full high-res versions of it. And he was the original innovator of like, once a year, let's do this, right? Let's celebrate it as a group. Alan Hillary is then inside the Tableau family, right? Inside of #DataFam. I think he's a Tableau ambassador. I think he runs a few tugs. There's like a data plus diversity. I think they even have a tug coming up about IW Wells. That's kind of the annual one that's there. And he's a part-time professor in New York City. So the two of them kind of met each other to bring sort of this teaching component, this Tableau component in the data viz. Jason Forrest, I believe, is still at McKinsey. So he's the head of interactives for McKinsey. And back when all this was happening, he was the head of their COVID task force. So everything COVID dashboard related that was coming out of them, and actually most of the ones coming out of all the other companies, right? So Johns Hopkins might have said, I had a dashboard. They didn't build it. McKinsey built it, and Jason was the head designer. So I'd say like Jason is kind of, from the webinars is how I picked up the history, because he tells a lot of good stories about the history, right? Alan and Anthony then turned it into, now let's touch history, right? Let's get immersive in that space. If I was gonna promote one thing, right? There's definitely a book with the actual visuals. I have a copy and I love it. I would recommend the Data Plus Diversity from 2001. They did it again in 2002, but I thought the 2001 actually got a lot more about the story of how did Du Bois, right, kind of get to Paris, right? I'll give you like a highlights here before we showcase some items. I was even watching it on the train again this morning because I was like, yep, refresh my memory, and was really enjoying it. So high level, Du Bois, it is pronounced Du Bois. Apparently somewhere on one of his notes, he actually like writes out the pronunciation, Nobody knows why he went with Du Bois. There's an interpretation of it was anti-French colonialism, didn't want to be called Du Bois. So it is W.E.B. Du Bois, born in 1868 in Massachusetts. So born towards the end of the Civil War, born right around Emancipation Proclamation, born in a northern state, right, a traditionally free state, slightly more tolerant state, right, even though there's still obviously the classic racial injustice that is just foundational in the country. But with that environment that was a little bit more open and nurturing, accelerated immensely as an individual. So first PhD African-American in the United States, and it was from Harvard. He's the founder of sociology, because he essentially wanted to tell stories about Black Americans post-slavery, and where is everybody migrating to, what kind of jobs are they getting, and what do they need as a population to actually continue the upward mobility. So anything that you've seen that's like, right, Philadelphia, where does everybody live in Philadelphia in the 1860s? How far away are they, right, from jobs, right? Is there public transportation near where they live? He's the first one to do that, right? If you fast forward to now, where you're actually seeing maybe like some Tableau maps of how far away are grocery stores from certain schools in certain disadvantaged neighborhoods, right? We're still doing exactly that today. And he was doing it before the word sociology even existed. So he did it first in Philadelphia. Let me see what my next slide is. Oh yeah, next slide is Paris. Did it first in Philadelphia, but someone asked if he would come to Atlanta, Georgia and start a school and actually kind of bring the same sort of social science to Georgia. And as he arrived and had some students and getting started, that's then this like moment in history where he got an opportunity. Would you go to Paris and tell the African-American story as you understand it now, scientifically, to Europeans? Go talk to elite Europeans, go tell them, don't listen to all of the crap you're hearing from the United States. We are definitely, we are a sovereign people, right? We will impress you. Almost inversely, help us now go back to the United States and, vouch for us, speak for us, right? Advocate for us. He was not asked to do data visualization. He was asked to go tell the story. He was given $15,000, figure out a way to do it, right? You'll have an exhibit in Paris. He had 4 months. You got 4 months, whatever students you can get your hands on. What are you going to do in that space? Then went to Paris, right, for this expo. So just generally speaking, the 1900 Paris World's Fair, right? There's 50 million people who visited the fair throughout that year. I wrote down a bunch of notes. I got in trouble for this last time. It's the first time the Ferris wheel was in Europe. Apparently last year I said it was the first time the Ferris wheel ever existed. Apparently Chicago gets that, but it was the first time it was in Europe. It was the first escalator. It was the first moving walkway like they have at the airports. It was all done in wood and mechanics. And it was the prototype of a movie with speech synced to it, right? So it was the first talking movie ever shown, although it didn't catch on. And it was also the beginning of like Art Nouveau as an art scene making an impression, was at the World's Fair. So a lot of that stuff, let's see if it's my pointer's pointing properly. Yeah, so a lot of that was actually built in front of the Eiffel Tower, right? You could even see the Ferris wheel kind of that at one end of it. Right, some of the automated walking was actually set up along the Seine River. But the fair actually continued all the way down here, especially in this section. And it was called, I won't pronounce the French because I'm terrible at it, but it was the Street of Nations, right? So it was the exhibition that any of the nations could sign up to actually get a space and kind of, promote themselves. And so that's where Du Bois and a few other coordinators set themselves up. I wish the picture was bigger, and I apologize, I don't have like a 3D interactive. That would be super cool. But it was not just data visualization, right? He had a call out to the African-American community. I need pictures of everyone who's prestigious. Who's got the best photographs? We'll put right, basically all the famous people up on the wall. There's even a statue of Frederick Douglass off to the side. Collected at the time, there were 400 patents that were owned by African Americans, because post-slavery, right, there was no restriction put in place from Jim Crow as of yet. And so they were actually starting the entrepreneurial investment into securing patents and selling the intellectual property to people. In addition to the patents, right, there was also the beginning of collecting what are some of the rules that are being written to obstruct us, right? Kind of wanted to have definitely a presence of, there's a bit of a specter that's growing. I don't think they fully appreciated it at the time. But I think there's like 4,000 documents of what are all the new rules that have suddenly been put in place throughout the United States. But the rest of the story from our perspective in data visualization is there were 60 posters created. And they're all based off of numbers and statistics, some of them specifically done about Atlanta, Georgia, since he had just gotten there, and that was the first study that he was working on, and some of it was just more broadly based about the African American experience at the time. As I show the posters, I did not edit the posters, so there's definitely alert that it does use inappropriate language, such as the word Negroes. I'm going to follow the same suit as Alan, Anthony, and Jason of leaving it there for historical accuracy and context. I just won't use the language as I'm actually presenting. My strongest recommendation is if you actually do the challenge to make the amendment in anything that you do using a modern tool. Some people are not following that suit. I think they're also trying to be historically accurate. It's just my personal recommendation. Here's some pictures of the students. So he tapped into the Atlanta University debate team. I think that was part of the group that was actually like, let's collect who are the prestigious folks. He had a group of women that were actually at the beginning of his sociology department in Atlanta. In Atlanta. And it's believed that this combination of these two groups were probably the people who physically made the posters. There's no digital, obviously, for 1900. So it's largely heavy cardstock-like poster and watercolors that they actually just handcrafted, hand sculpted, right? Kind of like classic design boards in that space. So the three themes that they went into throughout the 60 posters, it's sort of the we are here, right? They're always kind of like a statement of this is the current state of African Americans as of 1900. There's a separate section, this is who we are. And the last section, and I think it's the real reason why the Du Bois Challenge has gotten so much sort of fire under it, is this is how far we've come, right? There's a very inspirational component to it in the storytelling. So this first one, right, just a couple examples, right? So one is, so where are the states where there's, right, so like kind of like a population density, right? Even though it's 1900, right, 30 years after emancipation, you can start to see the migration north that's already in place, and that definitely resonates with. He started off in Philadelphia, where there's a lot of new folks moving up from the south, migrating to Philadelphia, and so capturing that in a visualization. The second one is, are people living in cities, or are people living rural country? And that gap between living in cities, right, where there's more money to be made versus still being in a rural environment, right, really wanted to illustrate exactly how big that disparity is, right? So the green line at the top lives in a city with over 10,000 people. There's a little blue for over 5,000 people, 2,500. But then this big red curly Q is because there's just like a dwarfing ratio of still in a rural environment versus moved to the city. And this is actually, from a challenge perspective, especially for us in like Tableau, right? This is every year in the 3 years has come up as like, this is one of the challenges, I think, specifically because it's powerful, it's very difficult, right? Very hard to do, regardless of it. So this is who we are. This was well designed. If you think of it from like, designed for your audience, right? And designed for the storytelling impact of how your data is going to make an impression, right? The authors of these posters, right? They're trying to tell their African-American story, and they're going to tell it to Europeans, right? So, let's talk about how large is the people nation, right? African Americans inside the United States at the time was just over 7 million people. So they made a visual, right? They made a mark of using the shape of the United States proportional to the 7 million people. They then made marks of their audience, right? So you got Spain, you got Australia, right? You got Scandinavia, Netherlands, right? Belgium, Hungary, right? You got all the people that are likely to travel to Paris to come to the World's Fair, and they proportionally made the size of their respective countries proportional to how big African Americans are inside of the United States, right? So this is basically saying, right? We African Americans, we're larger than Australia. On a person-by-person basis. We're larger than the Netherlands, right? Hungary was still an empire at that time, so we're not as big as Hungary, right? We're not as prestigious as Hungary, but we're bigger than Norway. We're bigger than Sweden. We're bigger than Norway plus Sweden, right? But we're not a sovereign nation, right? We're a people that's there. At the time, their version, right? The global version of education as a metric was not, what's the percentage of people with a high school graduation or a college degree or a master's degree, right? Because back then, illiteracy was a massive challenge across the whole population. The illiteracy rate was more of the indicator of education and not did you have a college degree. And they illustrated where African Americans sit and compared against other European nations. So the illiteracy rate is better than Russia. And this is at a time where they still have the Tsar and, the very prestigious sort of, royalty running a country. Better than Romania. I can never remember what Serbia is, so I don't know if that's like a Serbia. On par with Hungary, right? So Hungary was sort of this empire or small empire that was very well respected at the time. Yeah, we had the same illiteracy rate as Hungary, right? As a population, maybe a little bit behind Italy and definitely like some other European countries that are ahead of other European countries. But we're right there in the mix, right? Everything you've heard, completely wrong. We're right there in the mix as a people with our education rates. For the last one of this is how far we've come. This is where they really went for sort of the impact, right? The drama, right? So instead of having like a bar chart of what percentage of African Americans are free, right? So you can think of it as like the inverse of this, and maybe, some of the bars are 12s and some of the bars are 13s, right? And then you get to a point where, yes, there's a big bar where it finally gets up to 100%. They've almost inverted it to, yes, we're showing you the percent of us who are free, but it's just so boldly and so bluntly of what percentage of us were slaves, right? And on a very long time scale, right? And then you can see the Emancipation Proclamation. And then for someone like me who did not know the Juneteenth story, they were telling the Juneteenth story of it took another 10 years to go everywhere and actually get people to release free African Americans from people who are not listening to the new laws. And that's that dramatic slant there leading up to 1870. They were telling that story to Europeans 120 years before I finally heard about it in my 40s. which is a very dramatic effect. To go back to the illiteracy, right, and my scale is fuzzy, so I apologize. But yeah, literacy, I think all the way to the left is at time of the Emancipation Proclamation. And then it's basically like every 10 years after that, it just shows how the education just really accelerates leading up to the World's Fair. So very powerful storytelling message. I wish I could tell you that it made this wonderful impression on the Europeans to really come over and give us a firm talking to. Obviously, it did not. But among the African American community, this was a great expression of, we are in our infancy post-slavery. We are on the rise. We know we're going to have challenges along the way, but we are proud of our progress. And they made that entire story in 60 posters in 4 months. And getting to Paris, like back then, was a pain in the ass, right? So it was really, really impressive how they did that. So, Anthony Starks and Alan, I think they have a few more folks that are pitching in to help out. They're doing it a 3rd year in a row. And essentially they just keep doing this, one, to keep bringing up this story because it is a wonderful story. And then they keep picking and choosing a few that you can do in Excel, or you could do in Tableau, you can do in Power BI, and then a few that are really going to push you to the limits in terms of like, how would you actually get this item created. So I'll show you some showcase items, the ones that I've enjoyed this year. It's only been going on 3 weeks. So we're on the hard curly Q1 right now. But my examples, especially from some new data visualization people, is from week 1, right, which is stacked bar chart but done sideways. But yeah, if you want to keep following along after this session is over, follow on Twitter with the hashtag DuBois Challenge 2023. You will definitely see Anthony Starks in there chiming in quite a bit, and people who are actually submitting in that space, right? You'll kind of see them kind of following in there. The Anthony Starks also following the hashtag is where you can get to the website that actually has all the content. Probably before we get into the networking, I'll throw that link into the chat as well. Like I said, yeah, so 2 weeks ago, right, the challenge was let's work on this bar chart. I'm about to show you a couple examples. Last week, this was kind of fun since it was actually just right about value of land that's owned by African Americans, I think just in Georgia, right? And the bag's basically growing every 10 years. So it actually was kind of like a fun one to do, right? So some people were actually using a lot of cool kind of clip art, didn't even need Tableau to do it. But you can kind of see we're really going to start getting our butts kicked as we go a little bit further into the process. So first up was there were some students, I think they're in Arkansas. There's like she's definitely on like an Arkansas, is it Bulldogs or Bandits, as a basketball player. So Layla and Trenton, they worked on it together. So they both were posting like separately, but it all linked back to the same Tableau dashboard on Tableau Public. So I'll give a plug for the panelists talking about just get something on Tableau Public to show you care, right? So they're like freshman, sophomore in Arkansas, right? And they did recreate kind of the bar chart. So what's kind of like an average income band for a population? What is that income, right, as an average for the group? And then like a stacked bar chart. So where are you spending your money in this population? What was cool going back to the DuBois crew putting it together for Paris, this actually ends up being like an interesting data visualization moment. One, they used a graphical legend, right? So the black section is rent, and then they had a picture for the rent, right? The purple being food. There's there was some description. I think it was a blurb from an article. Right, a picture for clothes, right? So, but they used a legend. They used a graphical legend to tell you what the content was instead of just leaving it as rent, food, clothes, right? So that was probably a first, although someone's going to prove me wrong later. But the other first, and this one I wrote down because I want to make sure I get this right, where this was in that exhibit, this was the top poster that was lying flat on a stack of posters. And in the lower right corner of the poster, it had handwritten, "For further statistics, raise this frame." So officially, it is the first interactive dashboard because it was the top of the story and it actually told you how to go to story step 2, story step 3, and story step 4. And their interactivity was lifting up a poster frame to look at the next poster, lifting up a poster frame to look at the next poster. So yeah, I thought they did a good job, but I loved sort of the college students, right? They're doing the Tableau public. Up next, same dashboard. Kemi seems to have a stronger presence on Twitter, so I think a little bit maybe more mid-career. Definitely has a lot more followers than I do, and her Tableau public had quite a bit of density to it. So I'm going to run out of time if I click on this one and go deeper. For hers, I was actually going to open the dashboard, but essentially what I would show you is she had 3 sheets. She made a sheet for the bars, right, kind of like on one sheet. She used a sheet to create the optical illusion, right? She basically made a stacked bar with 20% equivalence to make that color. And then she used another stacked bar to do the blues and put the labels in there. Everything else is on the dashboard page, and it's all just text boxes and image boxes put in that place. So it was one, it's really cleanly done. She definitely had a following that loved it, right? I might reach out and kind of get to know her a little bit more. But it was just like a very straightforward one to get started. If I was going to recommend to someone doing it for the first time, can I download one to kind of get my feet wet? It would be this one because of how clean it was inside the actual Tableau file. New this year, though, is probably my new favorite moment of how this challenge is really branched out, right? It branched out all 3 years. The newest thing for the DuBois challenge is international people inspired by telling a story about enslaved people becoming free. And there's 2 of these now that have nothing to do with the United States. So Gabriel's the first one to do it, is out of Brazil. And if you actually look into the statistics of slavery, the highest number of enslaved people removed from Africa ended up in Brazil, because that slave trade was invented by the Portuguese, right? And the Portuguese, their colonization was largely in Brazil. And so, he did one of the enslaved population in Brazil in 1872 based on actual data. They were also liberated. I was supposed to write the number down. I think it was in the late 1880s, one of the last countries to actually have the equivalent of an emancipation proclamation. But I love that the challenge is actually inspired telling more stories in sort of this global transformation. And his was so inspiring that a gentleman from France, did I match it up? Oh, come back. I got it. A gentleman from France was inspired by him telling his Brazilian story. And so he's in France, but he is of Romani descent, right? So the slaves of what used to be Romania, right? There were sort of these 2 kingdoms. Right, and so the inappropriate language back then is the gypsies who used to be slaves that were then released. He did the same, really impactful in 1830. All the Roma were enslaved in what is now Romania. Right, over those 10 years, about 13% of that population was released by the state. Right, the really kind of haunting, or the biggest next population that was released by the church. And then the remaining that was sort of these kingdoms, right, kind of feudal properties over the next 10 years that then finally achieved a full emancipation. And because of that, Gabriel inspired me from Brazil. He made a very similar distribution of Roma, kind of in mid-cycle of the emancipation, right? Where do they live in modern day Romania? So, the DuBois challenge every year, right? Like I said, every year there's some new component that always kind of brings me back to it. I've only ever made one visual the entire time I've done it. It was actually one of the really easy bar charts from the first year. I keep going, I got to get back to it. Ashley was one of the ones that did it last year. So I showcased Ashley. But yeah, I cannot recommend enough the book to see the rest of the 60 posters. And I don't do it justice the way that I think they did it justice in that 2021 data plus diversity, where you get a richer version of the history, and then you actually get to see Starks talking about his coding-based software language that he does his custom data visualizations on, and then he plugs, you could buy his posters. So yeah, wonderful story. So I will stop jibber jabbering. Any questions? I do see there's some chat. Is there anything cooking in chat?
No questions. There was an article shared, if you're still sharing your screen and you want to open it up,
Sure.
Based off of one of the pictures you showed of the women sitting on the steps.
Oh, let's see. It was a basis of Bissia Butler piece. Come on. Let's see if Discover lets me do it. So yeah, some good Frederick Douglass. Oh, there we go.
Oh yeah.
Nice. Yeah, African American women from Atlanta University. Oh, very cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, someone should actually find a way to use that, almost like when you give credit for somebody when you recreate their work. That would be a good, like, yeah, this is my recreation of their handiwork. So
it's awesome.
Good showcase. Thank you, whoever shared. All right, any other questions, comments? All right, you want to take us to the social?
Yeah, thank you all, for joining and listening to our panel and Kevin's great Du Bois presentation. This is the end of our scheduled programming, I guess you could call it, but we will stick around, for virtual networking. So if there's more questions that you didn't want to ask or that didn't get answered, we'll definitely stick around. It's always great, just to chat with people in the community who share an interest. So feel free to stick around. If you have to go, we totally understand. And thank you guys for joining us.